I saw in like a comment, and like if any of our listeners saw this drink, please let us know. But someone in a comment said that the Boba Guys like made like an all lives matter drink.
It was just white. It was just milk.
Just pure milk.
Just pure milk. Welcome to the Politically Asian Podcast. We're two Asian American comedians talking about politics and the Asian American community in hopes of getting more Asians to talk about politics. We're coming at you live from Brooklyn, New York. My name is Aaron Yin. My pronouns are he, him, and you can find me on social media at Aaron Flarin. That's AARON FLARIN. And my co-host...
Hey, my name is Gerrie Lim. My pronouns are they, them, and you can find me across the internet at Gerriaki. That's GERRIEYAKI. And here are some words that I haven't said in a while. This week we have a new Patreon subscriber.
Woohoo!
Thank you. Thank you to Thomas Nguyen. We're planning on redoing some of our Patreon tiers, but it's been a minute. So if you're new here, we usually when we get a new Patreon subscriber, we give a fortune that's generated by this like random fortune cookie generator website thing, and then we interpret it politically Asian style. So Thomas, if you're listening, this is your fortune. The man on the top of the mountain did not fall there. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
The man on the top of the mountain did not fall there. It seems like a good quote for just saying stuff like work hard, be resourceful, get yourself to the top kind of thing. That's my first impression of this quote. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to be a quote about hard work. I guess like a second impression, if you think about Mount Everest, just going up the mountain there and how people need Sherpas and guidance going up the mountain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Be resourceful, yeah. I mean... The good and bad part about this fortune is that it doesn't specify how the man did get up there. Like, right, we could go super bad, and it's like, oh, he crawled on the backs of many other people to get there, right? It's like you just
exactly.
Or like you were mentioning with the Sherpas, they all worked together and got up together.
Yeah, or he could be obnoxiously rich and just helicoptered his way up there.
Yes, he did not fall. He was
he flew there.
He flew, yeah. He parachuted. he was brought on one of those those things, gondolas, is that what they are?
No, like, gondola is a boat.
Gondola's a boat. It's like a carriage, right? He was brought on
okay.
Four people carrying a carriage.
Yeah. Like you see in Game of Thrones or something like that. All right.
Yeah. I guess it's a general way to also think about how other people got to where they are. Sometimes through hard work, sometimes through nepotism. Great little framework for whatever you're going through in life right now, Thomas.
I feel like we take a perfectly normal quote and just like ruin it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, Thomas, hope that gives you a little guidance for either your own personal life or maybe some people that you're dealing with. And thanks for listening and supporting. All right, and now we'll go to the opening segment of the podcast. So this is our segment, Practice What You Preach. On this podcast, we talk a lot about politics, but it's also important to do things in real life. So each week, Gerrie and I talk about one thing we did in real life related to politics or organizing. This week, I'll go first. So as you all know, I've been picketing in front of the Museum of Chinese in America with many other people. Today's picket was a little different because we were celebrating two things. So number one, 7 out of the 8 people who got court summons from the NYPD had their court summons dismissed.
Woo!
Yay, great news. One person has not got their court summons dismissed. That person is actually me.
Great. Main character energy.
Bringing back very fond memories of elementary school, just, being the last person in line, and because my last name's Yin.
Oh, yeah.
The last person in the court summons. My case did happen later, though, so that's probably why, but it's just kind of funny. And the second piece of good news is that the NYPD cop in Chinatown from the 5th Precinct. His name's Vincent Chung, Cheung. He was the guy who was the first guy to really just start like harassing and intimidating us, trying to, throw all these tickets at us and give us big fees and say like, oh, you can't be here, you can't be doing this, you can't be drumming anywhere, you can't be protesting. He got suspended.
Ooh, yeah, spicy. What's spicy. The hot goss?
So, exact cause TBD. His suspension was posted in Tsingtao, which is like a Chinese newspaper. So that's how we've been getting the first info. I'm sure his suspension will be posted on like Legal Aid's website. They have a database for tracking NYPD with the exact reasons. Right now, it's up in the air. But I think one thing that really did help was when we had those marches from the NYPD to Mocha, and we just put tons of posters of Vincent Chung's face and Jonathan Chu's face all over Chinatown, because Jonathan Chu was also at the NYPD that same day that Vincent got suspended. But we don't know for now. There's definitely going to be an official release later.
That's super interesting that you know this cop by name. And I didn't realize it was like the same cop over and over who like comes over to y'all.
Oh, it's the same group of cops. And Vincent's a detective there. There's other common there's a whole cast that just repeatedly comes over. I just don't know the other names. I just know what they look like. There's just always this tall, bald dude who comes over as well. I don't know his name. He's like the, head of the little squad. But the 5th Precinct in Chinatown, their head guy is named Peter Zangrelli. He's also temporarily suspended for, I think, some kind of DUI-related charges. So there's a lot going on in the Chinatown Police Precinct, I'll say that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Fun times.
Well, hope you get your case, thrown out or whatever.
Yeah, I hope so, too. I think it's going to be a lot better since I'm the last one. And even if it doesn't go well, I think that's great. I think that'd be great for motivation. It's like, oh, this is unjust. Keep protesting for this, and this, but it should be okay.
Okay.
Either way, it's a good sign. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Gerrie, what were you up to this week?
Aaron's laughing because, you guys, after 2 years, I got COVID for the first time. Woo! Yeah, I got COVID for the first time. All I gotta say is I love science because I got boosted a month ago, and I was sick 5 days ago, and now I feel I couldn't run, but I can't run when I'm healthy either, so I feel overall really good. And I remember Aaron, when you got sick, you were coughing for weeks, and you coughed like your guts were coming out.
Yes.
Me at most, I sound like I'm choking on something.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. When I had COVID, that was back in July. So I remember coughing a lot, just editing so many coughs out of the clips, and my throat was pretty sore. So if you listen back to those July episodes, you might be able to tell. But yeah, you sound a lot better. You haven't coughed so far at all.
Yeah. I didn't even take any Dayquil or NyQuil today. So, but I still am testing positive, unfortunately. So there's that concern. But on... When was that? It was Tuesday, because I was about to go into the office and I realized my throat was sore. So I went to get COVID tested. And they let me know. And it went downhill from there pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you've gotten through the thick of it, though. That's good.
Yeah. The thick of it was definitely Wednesday and Thursday. And I didn't even bother taking off, but since I work from home, I was just telling people through Slack. I was like, "Hey, I have COVID," and they're like, "Oh, okay."
Wow.
So sorry to hear
you
that.
Worked?
I worked, but I didn't work. You know what I mean?
Okay. Wow.
But if you are my employer and listening to this podcast, I worked really hard. I worked really hard, and I cleared a lot of JIRA tickets.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, this week was a self-care week, I feel like, for you. just take care of yourself.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on. This week in Asian American news, we're going to cover affirmative action cases. Since that's going on in the news right now, we wanted to further discuss the impact of Asian Americans in that regard, specifically in the fight at Harvard. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like I was saying last time, Asian people in affirmative action, very much like peanut butter and jelly. The OGs. I will say, I guess for some background, so This is a lawsuit that was filed, I think like 2014, 8 years ago. It was at first shut down and then appealed, and now we're back again. It's the main group doing the suing is called Students for Fair Admissions, run by this white guy called Edward Bloom. He's always trying to find people to take down affirmative action cases and set up some legal precedents for, more and more universities. I'll start pretty general. I will say that in one article that I was reading, it's titled "How Asian-Led Student Groups Are Continuing Affirmative Action Fight at Harvard and UNC." I think this is a great way to get Asian Americans talking and caring about politics, because virtually every Asian person who has applied to college will have some opinion, whether good or ass, on affirmative action. So I'll start there and say it's great that we're getting some discourse here. Happy to be here at this moment.
I like that that's your grading scale is good and ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting take that like that's a good way to get people into Asian people specifically into politics. Also in that article, I kind of thought it was interesting. There was a blurb where when he was reached for comment, he directed the journalists to a Students for Fair Admissions rally that had Asian speakers. It was interesting to see him want like Asians to do the dirty work, but also interesting that he was not speaking for Asians. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was like, he's being somewhat progressive while he's being, you know what I mean?
I mean, sort of. It's because, he's the one helping file, right? And then he's just letting them speak. But I guess while we're still on the intro of just who's on this team, this Students for Fair Admissions team is made up of a lot of Clarence Thomas's former clerks.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Clarence Thomas, I guess now one of two black justices on the Supreme Court, but famously anti-affirmative action, this guy. So also his wife is famously pro-January 6th conspiracy.
Oh,
so
wow.
very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess digging a little bit into the Harvard case. So it is mainly focused on Asian Americans, and the groups like the TLDR is that right now they're saying it's like, oh, Asians are unfairly treated at Harvard. There's like a racial hierarchy with this personality rating. So black people are most desirable, followed by Hispanics, and Asian people are getting shafted by all of this and least likely to be admitted.
Yeah. So I think the article we talked about is the New York Times one that discussed how Asian American applicants rated lower on personality traits or whatever, right? It's like from 2018.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was reading that article and I was like, what is this personal ratings bullshit? And after like looking into it, it's apparently a score that's analyzed from your essay, your recommendations, and if you do an alumni interview or just like an interview, they give you like some kind of score. And typically Asian people score lower than white people. And I feel like what I got out of this is like, I just imagine like someone on the admissions team trying to like watching Crazy Rich Asians and like needing help understanding the cultural context of like the mahjong scene. You know what I mean? Like, if you write an essay on something that's like very Asian, and then like, your admissions team person is like a white dude, like they're not gonna get it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And they'll give you a shitty score. But I don't see how affirmative action is the fault of that. Yeah.
That's essentially how I feel about this, is that I do think Harvard should be called out for this personality rating bullshit. When I was reading the actual words, so Harvard consistently rated Asian Americans lower on traits like, quote, positive personality, likability, courage, kindness, widely respected. So it's like completely nebulous, and I'm reminded a little bit of my first question when I read that was like, what was the race of the interviewer?
Yeah,
because these all sound like cases where it was like a white interviewer trying to analyze an Asian person and just not understanding and just giving them a standard strong score instead of like, oh, they have personality, but maybe they just didn't want to open up to you.
Yeah. I guess like my question is like, okay, how did Asian Americans like read this article, maybe, like learn about this personal rating thing and simultaneously understand the concept of like a bamboo ceiling in terms of like job, like, oh, Asians aren't in management roles, but then like not be able to criticize this process in the same way.
Oh, wait, what do you mean?
You know, like in regards to conversation about the bamboo ceiling, everyone's like, Asians are seen as like not having the right traits to be a manager or whatever. And then like, I feel like being able to see that there, you should be able to understand this here, that the problem isn't with equitable practices like DEI or affirmative action. It's with the interviewers.
Yeah, exactly. Like I support in general a lawsuit against Harvard for doing this, but it's just
same.
The target is kind of weird. And, you know, I'm not sure what people know about Ivy League admissions in general. So there was this interesting paragraph in that same New York Times article from 2018 where Harvard University officials said that in a 2013 internal review, that if they only considered academic achievement, Asian Americans would be about 43% of the university instead of the actual 20%. But a lot of the reason why the Asian American population went down was actually because Harvard has a strong preference for recruited athletes and legacy applicants. So that's, you know, I think that's the core of discourse right now, is that like you can challenge something for universities based on race, but it should be challenging all these different programs, whether it's like Z-list, legacy.
What is a Z-list?
Z-list is like people who didn't get in one year who are like placed on a higher tier for the next year. I believe that's the term. Like Z, like the letter Z.
No, I heard you. I was just like, like, what is that? So like, like, how would that even work? Like if I did my first, I'd have to do my first year somewhere else, and then like I could apply to transfer?
Yeah, it's like transfers.
What the fuck? Okay.
I mean, legacy and recruited athletes are definitely the bigger ones. I think the people who have, there's just so many small categories, right? It's like if you have parents who work at Ivy Leagues, if you know, you have people who donated something to the university, like part of a building or a bench or something, right? Like
a building or a bench.
A building or a bench. Yo, even those benches are mad expensive.
A
you know,
tree.
You're sitting on like 200K benches. You know, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, so I think in general, it's like, you know, yes to calling out all the little systems in place at these Ivy Leagues that benefit primarily white people for now. Or Asian people.
Yeah, I know we're saying a lot of like, yeah, fuck Harvard. Harvard should, I hope Harvard gets like fucked in the whatever. But like, I feel like Harvard is just kind of like, oh no, you know, like it's very much like a, oh no, we'll have to be less diverse. Aha. Oh no, you know, like it's very much like they're not, I don't think they're fighting as hard as like they could be.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I understand that too, because Harvard, traditionally very white. I'm sure they're happy to go back to the 1700s as well.
Yeah, exactly. They posted their admission statistics, and they broke it down by ethnicity. They said it was like 15% Black students. Asian Americans were at roughly 28%. Hispanic or Latina people, 13. Native American, almost 3%, and then Native Hawaiians, almost 1%. But interestingly, they left white people off of that list for the admitted class of 2026. Like, what's that about?
They're literally making us do math to figure out the percentage of white people.
Exactly. Like, solve this diversity SAT question to get into our school? I don't know. Yeah.
So it's about, after we crunch the numbers, it's about 40. So about 40% white people, and then coming in second place right now, 28% Asian. So
yes, yeah. I guess my confusion is like, why are we looking at like the 15% Black folks and being like, their piece of the pie is too big, and then not looking at like the 40% white people and being like, how can we get a bigger piece of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I would highly recommend that 2018 article, because it was great that Harvard released their own internal review saying that like the biggest factors for pushing down the Asian American population are recruited athletes and legacy. And it kind of makes sense. White people have been going to Harvard for like centuries, right? So they have tons and tons of kids who just always have a higher admissions factor for being a child of a previous Harvard student.
Right. Like what Aaron is trying to say is that if you're white and still don't get into Harvard, you blew your chances.
Yeah.
Like you had a lead and you blew them.
George Bush got into, I think, Yale, and he was just consistently making C's. And I'm like, dude, no, there's so many legacy students who are like very average. But yeah, similar with recruited athletes. I always found it funny because Ivy Leagues are not famous for sports. Or they are famously bad at sports. That's why they have their own sports league.
Yeah, which is ironic because like the whole reason they came up with like the whole reason the term Ivy League came about was because of sports. They were like, we want to play sports against these specific people. Yeah, it became official only after the formation of the Athletic Conference in 1954. So that's also a relatively new phenomenon.
That's pretty new. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you just took if you took Harvard's football team, they would get absolutely destroyed by like Alabama. Like, let's be honest. Like, you know. Yeah.
It's not even. I don't care if y'all can do advanced calculus on the field on the fly. Like, nah, it's not the same league. No, those guys are pros.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, another article I thought was interesting was the NBC News one that's behind the vocal Asian American minority railing against affirmative action. It had a couple interesting points in there. One of them was many of the opponents of affirmative action didn't even study in the United States. They're mostly like higher educated people who got their degrees elsewhere.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to navigate the undergraduate experience in the U.S. They didn't have to, I feel like I can make the generalization that they grew up in mostly homogenized populations where, they didn't have to think about racism as deeply or experience equity policies. I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, mainly from China and mainly people who had to take the Gaokao, like the standardized college entrance in China. And over there, yeah, like my mom took it, my dad took it, all of my family members took it. There's no legacy for your dad went there. They don't give a fuck about that. There's no football team. I don't give a fuck if you're good at diving. What
about a ping pong team?
No. Ping pong. Hey, if you're still listening to this podcast right now, thank you for making it this far. Just want to do a quick quick plug. If you like our podcast, please take a few seconds on your phone to go to Apple or Spotify and click 5 stars. That really helps us out. And if you really want to support us, also you can feel free to donate on Patreon at patreon.com/politicallyasian. We're currently raising money to provide episode transcriptions, get a video editor, and more. All right, back to the episode. It's really different, yeah, and I don't even know how many Asian families even know that things like legacy and athletic recruits exist and how heavily valued they are at Ivy Leagues. Or maybe if they do, they think it's like a structure that's too hard to beat, so it's like, let's go for the smaller pieces of pie.
I guess I was not a good test taker, so to me it would seem more plausible to make it as like an athlete than it would be. I didn't either, just so we're clear. But I think it's also funny that it's like mostly like what I imagine to be like parents who come over here, because it's like, okay, you came here for a better life, but you want the education system to be more like Asia's, if I'm understanding correctly. The one that like gets people to like commit suicide because they failed a test. Yeah. We're talking about the same one? All right, cool, cool, better life.
Yeah, Gaokao is not exactly good. Yeah, not Hao. But
yeah, they do it in several, like in Korea and then Japan. There's also very like rigorous tests, and I think India has something similar, like a job placement test or something like that. Yeah, that like defines their life. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was also it said something about like prioritizing students from the Midwest while most Asians are concentrated on the coasts. So from that, I was like, oh, we got to Minari this shit. Like we got to move to like exactly. Do what Aaron did, move to Arkansas.
Exactly.
Thank your parents, man. Thank your parents.
Yeah. Oh, H-1B visa. That's
hey. And then lastly, prioritize students who want to study the humanities. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because that's payback to all the STEM pre-meds who shat on me and my communications major.
All right, moving on to the next topic we have. So we're going to Los Angeles, checking in on something our friends at CCED are doing. Basically, there's something going on with one of the largest low-income buildings there called Cathay Manor. So CCED and other people, they are urging the government to reject plans to sell this building to other developers. Basically, the situation is like, this is a very old building. The guy who owns it is also a Chinese dude named Don Toy, and he has criminal charges actually for failing to fix this building, and he's trying to sell it for profit. And the people who are living there are saying no. Gerrie, what is one thought you had about this situation?
I'm going to use someone else's words. I like this quote that was in the article. There's nothing wrong with making a profit, but the concern is that allowing the sale of this manor on the proposed terms would reward its current owners, Don Toy, for accepting federal funds for low-income housing while neglecting the property and its residents. I feel like that's a very good, there is clearly a bad guy here. You know?
The summary of that is we can't let the bad guys win. I mean, like, we can't let the villains win. It's like, you have mistreated all the elders in this building for decades, and then you get to profit off it? Like, no way. So because Cathay Manor in Los Angeles, so it's a 28-story building. It holds 270 units. And if you look at it on a map, it's pretty tall building in that section of LA Chinatown. They because they're like a special Section 8 building, you can't sell directly. Like, you need the government's permission to be like, okay, you can actually sell this building to someone else for profit. So that's why this thing's even happening. But the price that they're basing it off of is like a price estimate if you had sold the building and each room has an increased rent of $2,700, which is a lot. Yeah,
the article said it was 146% of a rent increase.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the concern also is that, like, this is a classic thing even happening in New York City, Chinatown, and the Lower East Side, and probably anywhere where a building is sold, is that, like, the person buying the building, in this case, they're a company, they're not a nonprofit, quote nonprofit, called Lutheran Gardens, and they're like, oh, we have no intention of turning this building into luxury units. The plan is to maintain affordability for a very long time. But when I hear that, like, my red flags start going up, because none of this shit is ever guaranteed in law. It's always like verbal promises or like memorandums of agreement. But I'm like, no, this sounds suspicious as fuck to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even trust that it's the whole thing about it being a nonprofit, because Don Toy, my understanding is that he runs the building through his nonprofit, the Chinese Committee on Aging Housing, whatever.
Yes. The Chinese Committee on Aging Housing Corporation. And when you see that, you're like, oh, it's a group that cares about old people living in Chinatown. But it's not.
Also, how can you be a nonprofit and then simultaneously have the word corporation in your name? I just feel like that's like an oxymoron, but what would I know?
Yeah. This guy has more than 300 code violations from that's a lot. A lot of criminal charges. And I think part of the issue with housing related housing issues or sometimes labor issues is that you have all these criminal charges, but like there's not enough enforcement in different ways, because this guy's like kind of chilling still.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why being a landlord isn't a job, because like, yeah, you're your own boss, but when you're freelance, if you're bad at your job, then like you'll starve, like, this guy's bad at his job as a landlord, and it sounds like he's doing fine.
Yeah, he might be making profit. Yeah. It's just a very common thing to not only try to sell a building, but first to also make it fall apart, right? Because a classic thing is you have a building, you don't fix it, you make it fall apart, and then you sell it to a larger developer who can, renovate it more easily and has more reasoning to renovate it if they can point to it and be like, oh, it's already broken anyway, so let me tear it all down and, build up to a nice fancy looking glass building that's, again, like $2,700 per month.
I just, the building is, what did you say? It was like a 28-story building, right?
Yeah. Also one of the last low income apartments in Chinatown.
Yeah, and like these are mostly elders, and like I would read articles about like how the elevators often didn't work. How is this not senior abuse, honestly? Like they should sue him for that.
Yeah, I forgot back in our episode with CCD, they mentioned something about these stairs and something about either running out of breath, hopefully not dying on the way up, but it was like pretty serious because it's a lot of it's 28 stories, right?
Yeah,
imagine you're an old person. You're an old person. You need to go to the 28th floor and there's no elevator.
My God.
And you have groceries. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like right now it's kind of up to this department and, city departments, at least in New York City, very famously, pro luxury, pro sale kind of thing. So we'll see how it goes. But I thought it was great to bring up as an example of like not all skin folk are kinfolk. Also, just how to deal with housing pressures and development.
Yeah, this is an Asian, Chinese American landlord. Just so we're all on the same page. Like, yeah, he sucks. Anyway, speaking on the same subject as not all skinfolk are kinfolk, we're going over to San Francisco to discuss how the Boba Guy workers are now saying that the company could be illegally recording customers and employees. If you don't know, California is a two-party consent state, which means that if you're having a private conversation, you can only record it if everyone involved knowingly consents. This is coming about after, workers tried to unionize at Boba Guys and were fired. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so for a little more context, the workers, they were trying to unionize, and then apparently the next day or two workers were talking in the store to each other, and they were like insulting the CEO, just saying he's like treating us like shit. And they were fired soon after, and they found out that the Boba Guys was recording their audio because what they said about the CEO was used as evidence.
It was cited word for word.
It was cited word for word. So, and they're like, whoa, none of us ever knew about this. It's not in the employee handbook. Yeah, very, very, very big brother. That's what I was going to say. Very, very big brother moment, right? You're already everyone has, video in a store, but now it's like you're also trying to listen in on exactly what your workers are saying in real time all the time. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not used to seeing video with audio. I feel like most of the video that I see of like inside of stores typically like audio less.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting to me that they specifically had audio in the videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bosses are saying that, this is a well-established practice within retail and hospitality, but that honestly sounds very bullshit. It's like you're telling me that one day after your workers talk about unionizing, then you start doing all this stuff, and it's like, no. You're definitely listening even closer to see if they were talking about unionizing at work the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for context, they were also unionizing because Boba Guys were drastically lowering their hours, so many of these Boba baristas, they used to work nearly 25 hours a week, but they were cut down to 9. So it's like, like a 66% cut, like 2/3. So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like livelihood, that's survival. Unemployment doesn't happen that fast either, the benefits. So
yeah. What else? I remember like seeing that the company has like a commitment to radical candor. And I think that's funny for two reasons. One, I've just found that people who talk a big game about hard honesty, typically just looking for an excuse to be an asshole. Like they're just like, oh, you can't handle my honesty. That's why you're such a snowflake. And then the second part is they say radical candor, but when their employees said that their CEO could eat shit, I feel like that was radical candor and they got fired for it.
Yeah. When we say we love radical candor, that's just the name of our drink, okay? Like,
yeah, it could have been. It really could be at this point.
Oh yeah, new flavors, radical candor, and let's throw in Big Brother as well. Yeah.
I saw in like a comment, and like if any of our listeners saw this drink, please let us know. But someone in a comment said that the Boba Guys like made like an All Lives Matter drink.
It was just white. It was just milk.
Just pure milk.
Just pure milk. Yeah. Yeah, and I thought this one quote from one of the workers, Madeline Urso, she responded with this great quote that says, like, our anger comes from the indignity of being forced to listen to this CEO flaunt his wealth while telling us that we will have to compete with each other for meager scraps he's going to throw at us. And I'm like, that is a great quote right there.
yes, I am pro-union. But what I hear from that is like he really could have avoided all of this if he hadn't been an asshole.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, he's all these articles are just him talking about like, I could lose everything that I started, and it's, dude, like, your workers already have nothing. I'm like, like, you're like incredibly tone deaf talking to your minimum wage workers about how you and your mansion could lose it all. I'm like, come on, man.
Oh no.
Come on, no, dude. Worst case, what happens? You become a boba worker. Like, you become the boba barista,
Right.
Yeah. Final thing on this one was just that funny ending where after this current controversy, the Boba Guy owners sent an email to their workers saying they would listen more closely. And I'm like, no, you need to listen less closely. That's the whole fucking issue.
That's what got you here in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hope the Boba Guys lose that lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. For now, it's like, for anyone listening who likes Boba Guys, I feel like one simple thing you could do, like Gerrie and I talked about, just don't go there while they're mistreating their workers, and maybe also a general note for people working at Boba Guys to meet outside of work and don't use the company Slack for unionizing, because clearly they're looking at that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reminded of you in the paper trail when I was reading that story.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can talk about that in our next story.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and well, speaking about company communications, so Elon actually went through with buying Twitter. He was forced to buy Twitter, and literally half of Twitter's workforce was laid off, along with a ton of their execs, including the CEO, head of safety. A lot of South Asians were actually pretty high up in Twitter, so they got laid off. And now employees are looking at a possible class action lawsuit against Twitter. So, Aaron, a lot to unpack here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say my first thought, being on Twitter while this all had happened was also surreal. I was like, it's always surreal seeing some monumental thing in history happen and you're just only on social media, just processing it all in real time. In this case, everyone else was too. But I remember that day and the past few days, the funniest thing was like all these Twitter people being like, oh, great news, everyone. We just spoke with Elon. Our commitment to community and safety and content moderation is still going to be very strong. And then 3 days later, their next tweet is like, hey, also, I just got laid off. Good luck with that. I'm like, what the fuck?
Bye.
That's happened. Yeah, it's happened with content moderation. It happened. I didn't even know Twitter had a, quote, human rights team, but they also got fired. The CEO got fired. Everyone's getting fired. Just to provide some numbers, Twitter has about 7,000-ish people right now, and they're laying off half, so about 3,700 are just gone. Very, Thanos snap gone.
Snap.
Thanos snap. Yeah. All of a sudden, they're like forced to compete for each other for these, 50% of jobs. It's just shocking to see all this happen really, really, really quickly.
Yeah, I heard the way that layoffs were calculated, where this was through TikTok, so take it with a grain of salt. But it was basically a grain of truth salt. It was basically how productive was that team, like how many goals did they accomplish, and so teams where goals were a little harder to hit, so things like safety, security, things like that, they accomplished less goals and therefore got laid off, which I think is going to be, I think there's definitely going to be ramifications for that down the line.
Yeah.
I think my favorite quote that I've seen so far is a Harvard professor called it the most poorly handled layoff she had ever seen, and a, quote, masterclass in how to not do it.
Yeah. I mean, a while ago, when we made that infographic on the worst Asian CEOs, we talked about the CEO of Better.com, right?
Yeah.
I forgot his name, but it was this Indian guy who laid off 700 workers over a Zoom right before Christmas or something. And I'm like, yeah, this is going up there on the power rankings of, worst firings. I will say, I mean, obviously, I think the bigger deal is just how will Twitter transform as a platform in the future. Elon, right now, I would describe him as honestly libertarian conservative, and even on Twitter right now, the amount of slurs that are still allowed on this platform is ridiculous. Okay.
Aaron's
truly,
counting.
Yeah, I'm sometimes there's people blatantly just are just saying a slur. Like, it's not even a slur that is, people didn't know about or something. It's like, no, this is clearly a slur.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of complex emotions just because taking Elon out of it, right? Like, Aaron, you and I have been on Twitter for like, I feel like a long time. And there was like a point where we were like pretty, what's the right word? I don't want to say competitive, but like we used to tweet like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we
very active on Twitter.
Yeah, very active. Met a lot of our first friends on Twitter there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still use it. It seems like you still use it a little bit.
Yeah. Just not to the same extent, where I was like, oh, that'd make a good tweet. Like now I just like keep it in my head like a normal person.
Yeah. So it is pretty sad to see. And obviously we'll probably go to TikTok and Instagram.
I'm going to Tumblr. I don't know about y'all, but Tumblr was like, just like 4 days ago, Tumblr was like, yeah, we're gonna let porn back on the platform again. I'm like, I'm back. You got me.
Yeah.
Twitter has always been like the social media platform where like I feel like we all went to and we knew what we were getting, right? Like we were like, this is gonna be a hellscape, and we know that.
Yeah.
Not like Instagram, where Instagram's like constantly trying to change form, or like, all the boomers are at Facebook. I don't know. I feel like the one thing I will say about Elon is that like he keeps saying this thing about free speech. Dude, please fact check me. I thought free speech was like a government thing. Like it has nothing to do if you're like a private or public company. Like that's not something to worry about.
No, defenders of free speech, like Elon, are literally, honestly, I'll just say the freedom to be racist, the freedom to say slurs, like that kind of thing. It's so ridiculous. And I think kind of tying in maybe more of an Asian angle as well. There was a Forbes report talking about how almost 700 workers are on H-1B visas. Obviously, not everyone on an H-1B is Asian, but typically, like, there's probably a fair amount from like East Asia or South Asia or Southeast Asia. So, especially tough for them because like if they don't find a new employer in a few months, then they just get deported like back to whatever country they were studying from originally.
Yeah, I think they have like 90 days, I think but it's a bad job market right now. So
yeah, that's what I was like, especially for tech. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that Twitter workers are teaming up to sue Twitter in like a class action lawsuit over the mass layoffs. California has a law where they are required 60 days of advance notice before being like laid off, which like I was like, I didn't know they could do that. Because I was laid off, but I mean, I don't live in California, so I guess, not protected by the same cool laws.
Okay, well, it's also for mass layoffs, though. I don't know what is considered as mass, but 3,700, definitely mass.
Sounds like a mass. Yeah. And I think that's like really interesting because for those of you who've never been laid off by a tech company, in the severance papers, there's often like a time limit on like the term, right? So Elon is like, oh, well, yeah, we laid off all these people, but we're giving them like 3 months salary or something like that. But the thing is like that deal is only good for like a certain amount of time. Like you have to like sign it within like a week of getting the paper to actually get the money.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And then typically there's a lot of legalese in the paperwork. That's also like you won't sue your former employer for literally any reason. Like it doesn't matter what it is. Like like accepting this money voids your right to sue them. So that'll be interesting to see what happens and what workers decide to do. Because I totally get taking the money.
Exactly.
I took the money.
Yeah. All these people on the class action lawsuit are definitely not taking the money. Like, they're in it for the long run. But I guess it's, if we ever need any more motivation to go on TikTok and Instagram, this is yet another little nudge.
R.I.P. Twitter.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because our friends from TikTok treat Twitter like a retirement home. And it's like, if Twitter's gone, where are y'all gonna go?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah.
All right. And that is our episode for this week. Thank y'all so much for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at Politically Asian Podcast, on Quickly Dying Twitter at Politic Asian Pod. Of course, if you really want to support us, please give us 5 stars on Apple or Spotify. I think that's probably the best thing you can do. Really helps us out, and we greatly appreciate it. Okay, thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye.